You're watching a replay of Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres. For more videos just like this, hit that red subscribe button.
And good morning. How you doing today? It's a Tuesday morning. It's an election day in Fall River, Massachusetts, where I'm from. And I want to say welcome to Brain Drain on 1480 WSAR from our studios here in Somerset, Massachusetts. And, you know, today is a perfect day to talk about something that is concerning to the growth of our nation, and that is voter apathy. What are we doing to make sure that people are getting out to vote? Are you actually in the process of going out to vote today if you live in Fall River, Massachusetts? Or do you go out to vote in federal elections, in state elections, in local elections if you live anywhere in the country? And why don't you vote if an election happens? And there's a lot of research out there about this. You can call in and join the conversation 508-673-1480 as we get into the discussion. You can watch us on WSAR.com, Spindle City Auto Glass Studio Cam. You can watch us on the J&J Diamond Jeweler Facebook Live Cam by going to Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres. You can also comment below, join the conversation that way, because this is a topic that we really need to dive into, because a lot of people are not voting. And we continue to point to the people, and they are the reason why people aren't voting. Well, it's your own fault if you don't vote. You're the part of the problem. You don't have the right to say anything if you don't go out and vote. We continue to say things like that over and over and over again, but we never ask why and what we can do in order to fix the process. What we're doing is we're victim blaming. We're doing exactly what we say people shouldn't do about other issues, whether it be bullying, whether it be rape, whether it be some type of thing. We victim blame people who are not voting, and we say that that's okay, just because of the fact that it's voting. But unfortunately, there's a reason why a lot of people don't vote. Last 2016, during the presidential election, only 55% of people who are old enough to vote came out to vote. 55%. And I know you're saying, well, that's a little more than half the Americans, but when you think about countries that are well developed and have the right to vote, we're among the bottom of places that people go out and vote. And there's numerous studies that go into this. There's numerous research there's tons and tons of research that goes into why people don't vote. And unfortunately, it seems to be it's very difficult to do a very objective view on voting. It's very difficult to find very objective research, because unfortunately the information tends to be very subjective. So I'm going to take a shot at it with a lot of the information based on unbiased information from me looking at biases on both sides. And I think that what we're going to end up doing is kind of relating or trying to relate to somebody who actually doesn't vote. Why are they not going out and voting? And the things that they say, and actually taking those things seriously. Because I think part of the issue is when somebody says, oh, I don't vote because none of the candidates represent me, or politicians are all crooked, we tend to look at that and say, oh, well, they're never going to be able to get to vote. We're never going to be able to change their mind. That is somebody that is screaming to you, who is saying, hey, you know, I want to vote. The issue is the system doesn't support me, or the system hasn't shown to reflect my beliefs. So let's try to bring in some of those people with the conversation today. Again, you can call in 508-673-1480. You can comment below on the J&J Diamond Jewelers Facebook Live Cam. I encourage you, let's talk about voting as a whole. Let's talk about your civic duty, which is voting, and how we can make more people vote. I want to leave you with this before we go into the break. So right now, there seems to be 4 reasons why people don't vote. First, they're saying voter registration takes a lot of work. Second, they're saying that people who lack education don't vote. And you know, I've actually talked, and yesterday I actually had the conversation about how we should be spending more money on education, put civics back into school, put philosophy back into school, put the arts back into school, and actually spend money So that way, people who are more educated are more likely to vote because they realize the impact of voting on their lifestyle. But they also say two parties aren't enough because both parties aren't representing the average person. And we've had conversations about this numerous times. Both parties in the United States, whether it be Democrat or Republican, they don't represent the average person. And sure, we had third-party candidates running for office, but the way that the system works right now in the United States, the way that voting is done, if you aren't one of the two major parties, you're not going to get elected to office if you're running for a federal, not a federal office, but president, let's say. Because there are some people who are independent in Senate, there are some people who are independent in the House. But the likelihood of that, if you're not a multimillionaire, is very, 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 very unlikely. So, if you're running for president, the odds of you being elected to office and you're not one of the two parties is highly unlikely. Case in point, Bernie Sanders, who became a Democrat just to run for office. And then, last but not least, apathy and burnout. Compared to other countries, we have so many elections, so many special elections for who knows what reason. And it's really just burning people out because they constantly feel like they have to constantly keep on top of things, and you burn people out of the process. And it's also very complicated. In the United States, we make people feel like they have to know a lot to be able to give an informed vote. And that's unfortunate because the system shouldn't be this complicated. It shouldn't be like doing taxes. You shouldn't have to just rely on the information that you shouldn't have to do vast research to vote for who you think best represents you. It should all be present. But you don't see position papers anymore. You don't see information about where people stand or the comparisons between one person and another person. You don't see that kind of stuff anymore, which forces you, the average person, to go out and find that information. So I pose to you, what can we do to make more people turn out and vote? You're listening to Brain Drain on the legendary 1480 WSAR. We're going to go into a commercial break. The lines are already lighting up. 508-673-1480. If you're on the line, stay on the line. You don't want to lose your spot. Somebody on Facebook Live says, the young people that I've asked, the voting system is nothing but a big lie. No belief in government. And you know, that's happening a lot more and more as time goes on with young people. And somebody else says, who's paying for the new school? Because that's what Fall River, Massachusetts is voting on today. And the response was on Facebook Live, the taxpayers. Who else? So really, when you look at it, is that the answer? And I've talked about numerous times here on this show about how politicians aren't in the interest of working with people who are new voters, because why are they going to go and try to create new voters when they can go and deal with people who have historically voted over and over and over again? And what we see is politicians pandering to seniors. And they're passing legislation that specifically benefits seniors. Meanwhile, people who are young aren't really seeing any of that. People who are old enough to vote but are considered young by politicians aren't seeing any of these benefits. So who are they really representing? And unfortunately, all it does is discourage new people who are coming into the system from actually voting. You're live on legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Oh, good morning.
How you doing today?
Fine, thank you.
Good to hear.
I just wanted to let the elderly and maybe widows and widowers that they may not realize, but in Massachusetts and in Fall River specifically, and I know it because I benefited from it, they can get a $175 rebate for their taxes by being a widower, or by being a veteran. And maybe some of these elderly that are worried about this $115, maybe should look into that, because I did not realize it until a new neighbor told me. So, did you get your rebate? Did you get your rebate? And I said, rebate for what? She said, a widow or a veteran
Thank you.
$175 a year on their taxes.
Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day.
Yeah.
And you know, it's funny because a lot of places provide a lot of rebates and a lot of incentives for people who are elderly. But again, you don't see those same kind of situations for people who are working class, who are trying to contribute to the system, people who may not be able to experience Social Security because the system is being bled dry right now, and it's something that's been happening for the past 30 years because Social Security for the longest time was the piggy bank of the federal government, where over and over again they pulled from the Social Security system, screwing the future of everybody else to pay for pet projects. And now we're seeing the ramifications of that today. So really, when you see it, if you want to talk about another reason why people would be discouraged from actually voting, it's because all the policies and all the benefits in place benefit those who are elderly, but there really isn't anything in place for those who are young. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning. You know what you say about politicians not wanting new voters. They just want the old. There's a lot of truth to that.
And not only that,
you get an example of that right in the city with the free chow mein sandwiches.
Here's the funny thing about that. To that point, I don't even think they want only old voters. I think they only want people who are going to vote for them. So if a low voter turnout benefits them, then they want nobody to go to the polls.
Well, low voter turnout always benefits the incumbent.
Right.
And, status quo. But, this high school, I mean, you're not getting the whole truth on that. That statement that was made, well, maybe we can eliminate the debt exclusion pay. Maybe. There's a good chance. That's just to get people to vote for it.
Now, here's the funny part about this. So one of the issues, and we'll point to this issue as part of the thing, but a part of the reason, but we can point to every issue ever discussed in government. Unfortunately, there are two sides of this argument. And there should be a third side who's just simply talking about the facts. Now, what ends up happening is you have people who are pro and people who are con, and I'm not talking about specific people. I'm talking about people that I hear out in public in general. They're giving misinformation, or they're only pointing towards certain pieces that benefit only their argument, but they don't point towards all the facts. And
30-year note's a 30-year note. That no matter how you look at it, that's what it boils down to.
But the point that I'm trying to make is, rather than saying yes or no and arguing for yes or no, how about we change the dynamic where we just simply put out all the information as it stands, unbiased? How about we start paying people who are reporters to actually go out and find information as opposed to losing those jobs? We start paying for those people to go out and find unbiased information so that way people can make informed decisions again. Because unfortunately,
never going to happen.
And that's the issue.
It's going to be, they're going to, it's not going to happen. It's people, even when they get the right information, they don't listen anyway.
Well,
they listen to what they want to listen to.
And you bring up a valid point. Look at some of the stances that I take that's right smack dab in the middle. You'll have conservatives call in and say I'm a lefty, and you'll have liberals call in and say I'm a righty. So
it doesn't matter. It's what they want to hear at the particular time.
And that's part of the issue, is a lot of times people are only looking for what they want to hear. But that still doesn't get by the point that people are not voting. And people aren't voting because they feel that the system is failing them. And there's numerous reasons why that.
I mean, you take like on this school thing. You take the average guy or senior that has a single family house. They don't have any kids in the school system. Maybe they never had any kids in the school system. And it's $115 for 30 years. Well, all they're going to be doing is paying until they die. People like that should get an exemption. I mean, if you don't have any kids, you're all by yourself.
But an investment,
and you're a property owner. You got a little house to live in.
So here we go.
What?
Here we go.
There should be some type of system for that. And people say, well, somebody paid for them when they were going to school. That was they got an exemption in those days. Over 70, they almost got a break on their taxes years ago. They get away with that.
All right, I hear your argument. And, I'm going to let you respond to what I have to say, but I hear your argument. And this is what I say to that. We need, and money should be invested into education. It needs to be paid for one way or the other. And what we need to do is figure out how to pay for it. Now, that being said, if you don't invest in education as a taxpayer in a society, if you don't make that your top priority, then your society is going to fail. because
You know
people
who's
are
screaming
going to
up for
leave.
this high school the most? The business community, because they want an educated labor force.
And who is going to be impacted by taxes the most?
They should be impacted by the taxes because they just pass it on. They should pay for the whole thing. It should all come from the business community.
But again, they're the most impacted.
Because they're just going to pass it on to the consumer.
Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day. And, you know, I think that the person brings up some fair points. But again, education is something that helps societies grow as opposed to the opposite happening. So the system has to be paid for one way or the other. The question is how are you going to pay for it? And to dive back into the voting conversation, right now, the process is being set up in such a way where it removes the power of the actual voter to have a say. So, for instance, if you want to vote for an actual change, and you can get a bunch of people to vote for an actual change for, say, president, guess what? The Democratic or the Republican National Committee stops you from having that word spread. And there's no clearer example of that than the 2016 elections with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders should have been the Democratic National Committee pick. But unfortunately, what ends up happening is because of politics, Hillary Clinton gets elected. And when you really, really, really look at the cause of that, you had two candidates who weren't representing the average person in the United States. So people, when they went to the polls, if they went to the polls, voted for the lesser of two evils instead of actually voting for who best represented them. And this continues to happen over and over and over again. We get these political party operatives over and over and over again. And I'd argue Donald Trump isn't necessarily a political party operative. But what I would argue is Donald Trump seems to be falling into party lines. He seems to be falling into who his base supports, and his base supports a lot of the time the ultra-right. So when are we going to find that person who seems to operate in the middle, who doesn't abide by the party lines? And we can't do that unless we change the way that the voting system actually works. But does the average voter have the opportunity to do that? Probably not. And here's why. Because the average voter is going to be squeezed out by the Democratic and the Republican national committees. So if you wanted to introduce a third party, you'd have a tough time doing it. If you want to change the way that we vote, you'd have a tough time doing it. So really, do you have a voice? Do you have a voice? Because your voice seems to be diminished over and over and over again with things like Citizens United, which gives more power to businesses because they can submit more money. On the other side of the break, we'll continue picking up the calls, 508-673-1480 if you want to join the conversation. If you want to comment on the J&J Jewelers Facebook Live please continue with the comments. Somebody says, why didn't they sue the contractors who did a lousy job on the existing building for some of the cost? And that's, again, people who are talking about the Fall River, Massachusetts vote that's today, talking about a debt exclusion to pay for a new Durfee High School. And I think it's an important vote because, again, this is opportunity for people to vote on education one way or the other. They're voting on education, but we have to figure out a way to pay for it. So you're live in the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
How you doing today?
I just want to say some of the reasons why people don't vote.
Sure.
It is besides apathy. It's because when the politicians, which you were one of, get elected,
was one of.
You don't contact the people and ask them how they feel about things. But there's no problem with getting a robocall when it's time to go and vote. I mean, that happens all the time. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. When has a city councilor ever called anybody and asked them how they felt about a TIF?
Every time.
I have never been asked the question.
Okay.
I'm a taxpayer. They don't ask me.
So you know how I came up with a lot of the things that I voted on, and this isn't something that happens. I would go out in the community and talk to people. I'd go out into the community and have conversations about the issues that I was facing and find out what they genuinely thought of the topic. And then I'd give my opinion, and I would do, ultimately, based on all the information that I had around me, what I believe to be the best thing to be done. Unfortunately, that's not what happens. Unfortunately, politicians tend to do what they think is going to get them reelected. And they toe this line of what is going to get me reelected as opposed to what isn't going to get me reelected, and where can I stay somewhere in the middle if it's something that's very, very controversial. That happens over and over and over again. You see that at local, you see that at state, and you see that at the federal level.
And everything is done like behind closed doors. I'll give you a good example today. I voted today. I already voted. I voted yes. I'll tell you right, I voted yes.
Okay.
However, when you read the paper, and learn, I went to vote. I might have voted yes. The city council can vote no. Then what the hell did you ask me to vote for? Because it has to go back to the city council.
And ultimately, the city council just confirms the actual vote.
That's not true. Because I'll give you another good example. Let's go to the state level. Okay, the income tax in the state here is supposed to be at 5%, and that was passed about 20 years ago, and we're not there yet. Now, there's a good example. We're not down to 5% yet. It might be 5.1, But they're not down where they're supposed to be. We voted for that a long time ago.
So
politicians don't listen.
Here's a question, and I disagree with you to a certain extent. I think that some politicians don't listen, but I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a politician. So imagine that you want to vote on something. How do you reach out to people in such a way where a lot of people have the opportunity to give input on the way that you're going to vote, and have educated input on the way that you're going to vote? Because I'll tell you right now, being somebody who was in elected office previously, I heard a lot of opinions on things that I voted for, on a lot of information that I had, and when you ask people the information that they have to support the opinion the way that they feel, they say, oh, well, I just feel that way. Well, what have you read? Oh, I just feel that way. Well, you know what? In my opinion, it's very, very difficult to trust somebody just on feeling a certain way when they have no real research to support them. And that's part of the problem. So how do you make sure that you're doing the most informed vote? Honestly, I'll tell you right now, I give a damn about what the majority of people actually want. It's more so about what is going to be the best thing for the future, based on historical evidence, based on information. And that's the way it should be. And you know what? If people want to contribute to a conversation based on real information, then that is the way that the system should be operating. Unfortunately, people who just have an opinion based on nothing other than they woke up in the morning and they thought this, think that they should have a real say in the matter. And unfortunately, a lot of those people get elected to office and they're not doing anything except for waking up in the morning and say, hey, I'm going to vote this way, or I'm getting a kickback from this, so I'm going to do that, or this is going to get me more votes, I'll do this. That's unfortunately the way the system works right now.
And it's also going to be interesting today, on page 14 of the new charter, it says if 20% of the people more than 20% of the people don't vote, that's not going to count.
And, it's very, very interesting because on a charter, on the actual charter, I'd argue that the people who wrote the charter are right. That, unfortunately, the city is not operating a charter. And part of that is because of the fact that there isn't two different forms of representation. One form of representation in legal matters for the legislative body and one form of representation for the executive body. Just like every other state organization or municipal organization or federal organization actually has. Because, unfortunately, all you get is one slanted view that only benefits the executive body instead of the legislative body, which is supposed to represent the actual people. And when you continue to have that, when you continue to have people who are pushing for legislators to be underinformed, the people who are electing these legislators to be underinformed, executives who are underinformed, the more you have that, the more you have the push for that, the more that you're going to have less and less voter turnout. So really all we're experiencing is the result of our actual own work. And it's a shame.
I leave you with this. Please go out and vote.
Now,
have a good day.
Thank you. And that's a plea for help, because ultimately everybody should be going out and voting whenever they have an election. But unfortunately, the system is rigged in such a way, at least at the federal level, where you have very little voice. because Citizens United makes sure that your money actually doesn't help the politicians. So your opinion on actual issues doesn't matter. And there's more and more research that's showing that the average person doesn't have a say in the actual situation, on what's being voted on actual legislation, or even a say in the beginning of the research of actual legislation. Now, to the previous caller's point, he said, if there should be a way to reach out to multiple people who you represent, but unfortunately, a lot of those people don't use information, the actual information that's ready to them, in order to come up with an actual opinion. And that is frustrating. A lot of those people don't listen to talk radio. They don't dive into the research. And what ends up happening is you have people who have these crazy opinions based on nothing more than an opinion. So what happens if you represent a group of people who says that they want to hang all people of color in a society? What happens if you have all people, a large group of people who says that they want to kill all the firstborn children of everybody who lives in their city? Are you just going to go along and do that because the people that you represent want that to happen? Think about this for a second. And I know I'm using extremes, but it's very difficult for somebody who is a representative in some way, shape, or form to just do whatever the mass populace that they represent does. And that's the difference between being somebody who's trying to get reelected over and over again, or being a statesman, somebody who's actually trying to make positive impact and growth on the society that they're a part of. And really, when you look at it, why is it that this information doesn't get put out in an unbiased manner? Unfortunately, what happens is you have one slanted view talking about the issue, and you have another slanted view talking about the situation, and nobody talks about the issues in the middle. Nobody just puts out the unadulterated information and just says, hey, this is all the facts. You take it and you do what you want with it. That doesn't exist. Maybe that's how we change the political process. Maybe that's how we get young people involved, because they feel like they were able to help make an actual decision, as opposed to having a decision force-fed down their throats. Because right now, people who are young feel the system doesn't represent them. They also feel that they can't change the system because the system is rigged. They also feel that their vote doesn't matter. And you know what? The statistics more and more are showing exactly that. Their vote, their opinion, does not matter. So how can we actually change that? I'm going to go live to another caller, 1480 WSAR. You're live in the air. What's going on?
Hey, good morning.
Morning. How you doing today?
Good, you?
I'm doing all right.
Apparently, I owe you and your audience an apology for giving you a wrong website about Children of God.
Let's squash
I will
this.
do that, and I'm sorry for giving that wrong information out, because it was childrenofgodforlife.org.
All right. So again, why are we still talking about this? Let's talk about the topic at hand, please.
All right, go ahead.
All right, so we're talking about voting. Do you think that people's votes matter? Why do you think that people aren't voting?
Well, I don't vote because it's the government is not representing us anymore, and
Okay.
they haven't since the mid 1870s, early 1870s, because the United States turned into a corporation, and the municipalities all turned into corporations, and corporations do not serve the people.
It's funny because I kind of agree with you, but I don't think that it's because municipalities.
For the municipality, it's a corporation. I know you can't say that.
No, it's a corporation. There's a corporation council. Every single municipality has to register. Ultimately, is registered as a business.
It's a business. It's registered as a business.
But that's for taxing.
If you don't believe that, you can go to Dun & Bradstreet. They're a corporation rating agency. Fall River is a corporation. So is the municipalities.
But that's for debt service.
They don't represent people. They represent a corporation and a profit.
See, you're reading into this too much. So ultimately what happens is the reason why rating agencies have to come into municipalities is to rate the actual debt that they have on hand and new debt that they're trying to go for. So what they do is they look at the overall... You gotta let me finish. So overall what they do is they look at the overall fiscal health of a municipality, and they decide whether that is a safer place to invest in or not a safer place to invest in, and that is to actually benefit the people who would be investing in these municipalities.
Well, yeah, but the municipalities I mean, even the school board is its own corporation. So, and every one of these corporations have their own comprehensive financial annual reports, and that's not made public.
Yes, it is. Actually,
It is?
every single budget is made public. Every single proposed budget is made public. And if you ask through Freedom of Information the recap, you would get that at the end of the year if you asked for it. So, yes, that is made public.
The last one I looked for in Fall River, I think I could only come up with, I think it was either 2012 or 2013. How's that going to benefit me about what's going on right now?
So, file a Freedom of Information Act and ask for a recap. You can do that. That's your right. You have the ability to do exactly that. So, as opposed to just assuming that it's a conspiracy against anybody, you just do the additional work and get the information.
Well, yeah, but how come that's not made public? How come, we got to dig and scrape the...
I'll tell you why. Because they don't want you to see it, but you have the right to see it.
Well, yeah, but if it's not made known, how's the average person going to realize that? How are they going to get this information if it's,
So make it known.
I have to scrape and dig for the information that I know so far, and then I get stuck at a 2012 or 2013 budget, and I'm like, all right, now I got to dig some more, and I got to waste more time to search, and I only have so much time in the day.
So make it known. That's easy enough. If you feel that you need to know it, then make it known. And you know what? I agree with you. We should see recaps. Did we meet our budget at the end of every single year, as opposed to hearing the words just come out of a politician's mouth, especially the politician who's in charge of the executive branch. So again, I think that you're right there, where we should be able to see those recaps, and it should be made public immediately, as opposed to this backdoor type of thing that especially the administration in Fall River, Massachusetts is condoning at this point in time.
Yeah,
So,
and with this thing that's going on with the schools, rebuilding the brand new schools, I don't oppose the new school. It's the way they're going about it, because as you know, that everything that they do is because of the grants that they get, and those grants have all kinds of stipulations in them, but we don't get to read that.
actually, you do. It's freedom of information. You have the ability to look at all that stuff. Just file for it. That's the issue. That's the misconception, is that this stuff isn't at your fingertips. It is. All you have to do is just file for the information. It's right there. Ask for it. Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day. And actually, somebody on Facebook Live, on the J&J Jewelers Facebook Live cam, just said everyone should stop paying their taxes. They can't arrest the whole country. Lack of money would make them listen. And that's a fair point. Right now, we are paying taxes at the federal level and the state level for them to represent us. But unfortunately, it seems that they're representing the people who pay above and beyond taxes, which are the businesses. So that being said, you know what? If they don't think that that's enough money to listen to what we have to say, maybe we should just stop paying taxes. That's a fair point. You're live in the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for taking my call. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with you on something.
Okay.
I hope you don't mind.
No, please do.
Okay. All right. I understand you're saying that everybody can get their hands on information, but that isn't necessarily true.
Okay.
And Mike Mioza was nice enough to be able to send out the proposed home rule charter to everyone,
Okay.
no matter who could get their hands on anything.
Mhm.
And along with that, might I add, he sent out the pro and con information along with the municipal ballot questions, all in one neat package. This time, when everything is hitting the fan, not one thing was sent to us. Nobody got anything sent to their door. Nobody got anything in the mailbox. However, I did see a great big billboard off Route 79 inviting everyone to vote on the issue.
So it's
that
funny.
That money could have been spent to send everybody something.
It's funny that you say that, because there's actually an ordinance in the city of Fall River that says that whenever they're voting on issues, there has to be a mailer that's sent to every single person who's registered to vote in Fall River, Massachusetts. So if that didn't happen, then the city violated its own rules.
Yeah, and yet nothing was sent. And you're right, something was supposed to have been sent, and yet nothing was. How did that happen?
So here's what I have to say about that. Yes, information is at anybody's fingertips, and if you don't have information available to you and you want to find that out about your state, your federal government, your local government, you can't. Hold on. No, let me finish. you have the ability to file a Freedom of Information Act and get that information. I'm sorry about interrupting you, but go ahead, please.
Okay. And also, there was nothing about the Proposition 2.5 override. By the way, your voting right to ever get that genie back in the bottle.
So they're actually voting on the people in the city of Fall River are voting on a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion. There's a difference between an override and a debt exclusion.
And please, before you vote, read and then read some more and share whatever you read with each other. Talk to each other and then vote. Look, we all love our kids. We all want a beautiful high school. Our children are our future. They're precious to all of us, even those of us that don't have small children anymore. If Atlantis Charter School did this without all of this BS and everything else that's going around, then why can't the city? Of course they can't. We need to force the city to do it right. In the event that we vote no, the school department will have no choice but to put their best foot forward, put their lipstick on, get their hair done, and submit another application.
Thank you.
On behalf of the students they love.
Thank you so much.
And get invited back into the process.
Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day. And here's the tough part about this vote is they're not going to have a second go at this, even though people are saying that they are. Good morning. You're live on the WSAR. Good morning. You're listening to WSAR 1480 AM. What say you? You have 45. You have 45 seconds. By the way, I'm sorry about keeping you short. You can call in later, but
I'll keep it short then.
Go for it.
So real quick, the reason why people aren't feeling represented is because their politicians are bought and paid for by lobbyists because we don't have public election funding the way some other countries do.
I enjoy every single time you call in, and we are going to the news break right now. So please do call back in after the news break because you can drop the mic on that point because you were on point 100%. Thank you so much for your call.
Rich.
Call back in on the other side of the news hour because I want to hear more of your opinion. Every time we have a conversation, whether we agree or disagree, you always have some great research to support your opinions, and I want to hear that. And whether you agree or disagree with me on any of the issues that I talk about, call in 508-673-1480. That is why it is that people, unfortunately, are not voting. Whether your government represents you, and is that why you're not voting? Because more and more, as you talk to more and more and more people, what ends up happening is they tell you. They'll say, listen, my government doesn't represent me. My voice doesn't matter. They're saying all these things. And unfortunately, what happens is the same people point at them and say it's their own fault why the system is the way that it is when it isn't. Your vote, unfortunately, isn't going to change much, if it changes anything at all. And the reason is because the two-party system. It's because corporations have more say in government than you actually do. And that, in my opinion, wasn't the way the system was supposed to be set up. And by the way, if you're looking for a used car, Prestige Automart is a family-owned business since 2003. Prestige Automart really is your premier destination for quality used cars. Stop by any one of their 3 great locations, Westport or Taunton, Massachusetts, or East Providence, Rhode Island, to see Jeff and Manny and look over their more than $10 million worth of trucks, cars, minivans, SUVs, and luxury automobiles. There's something at Prestige for everyone, and with interest rates from just 1.9 APR and guaranteed credit approval of the car is free, there's no reason to look anywhere else. So head over to Prestige Automart today, tell Jeff and Manny that I sent you, and you'll be driving home in the perfect new-to-you car today. We're going to go back to the lines, see what you think. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
All right. Good morning, Rich. How you doing?
Good to hear from you again. I always love hearing from you because whether we agree or disagree, you're always very well informed. So go for it.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I'll just pick up where I left off, which is basically we need to look at campaign finance reform if you want your politicians to actually represent you. Because what happens is, with the exception of the local Democrat, the DNC and the RNC, and both at national and local levels, there's not a lot of money to get yourself elected or reelected. So you need to essentially take campaign contributions from large corporations or large interests, and chances are they're not going to donate to you unless you represent their interests favorably.
I agree.
That's just black and white.
I agree with you 100%. Or they're supporting you because they're hoping that they're going to get a favor if they ever need one.
Absolutely. And then on top of that, what I'd like to also add is a lot of other countries, a lot of the first world countries have a national election day where it's a holiday and
yes.
You go and you vote and you make your voice heard. And we don't have that.
Yes,
and
you
it's
just
kind of
made
baffling to me.
You made one of the points that I was actually going to bring up is if you go to places like Australia, they actually have a day where people, after they go out and vote, they all sit around at the pub, they have a beer, they talk about the election. They actually have a day off, so there is actually no excuse on why they couldn't get out and vote. So not only do you celebrate the day off as your freedom, as part of your freedom, but you also have the opportunity to be able to go and spend some time with your friends afterward and reflect. And it's funny because, unfortunately, one of the reasons why that doesn't happen in the United States is because we insist on having special elections on every menial thing possible. And it's crazy to me. Why don't we just have at least, or at most, one election a year?
You know, I agree with you. As far as the special elections go, obviously I agree with you that we have too many. And we can't certainly have a holiday for every special election day. But with that said, for the big things that really count, national elections, maybe state elections, it really should be a holiday. If you have 2 holidays a year, or every other year, or so on and so forth, I think you'd see a dramatic increase in voter turnout. And I'm not sure if people who are in politics necessarily want that. The people who are certainly...
Because you would give everybody a deadline.
Don't want to move.
You would give everybody a deadline if there weren't a special election and you had to have all of your ballot questions and everything in by a certain day every single year. Somebody on Facebook Live actually immediately responded to one of your comments. They said, get involved, do your research, request information, and vote. It matters. And they said, agreed, National Election Day holiday, it's that important. So that you're getting immediate feedback on Facebook Live and they're loving what you're saying.
Well, I'm glad that people agree with that, and I think it's a great idea. And on the subject of elections, real quick, Rich, I want to talk about the Durfee High School, the debt exclusion. I don't live in Fall River, but I work in Fall River, so I listen to WSAR most of the day. And I just want everyone to understand, even if you are a no vote, even if you, for reasons that I will not understand, if you are a no vote, you are still going to pay to get that high school fixed, and you are, in fact, going to pay more money to slap a new coat of paint on an ugly building, when you could get a brand new high school that's going to be state-of-the-art for less money. It is black and white, clear as day, clear as crystal. You can pay less to get something nicer, or you can pay more for junk.
Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day. You're live on Legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning, Rich. You're one of the all-stars here at WSAR. Tune into you guys all the time.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You know something, Rich? Democrats and Republicans have hoodwinked the American people for a long time with a smile and handshake. The same two Democrats and Republicans sold off the Panama Canal to the Chinese. All our jobs have been outsourced. Most of our jobs have been outsourced. Quality of life's gone down. While you're here, both sides, whether you watch Fox News or you watch CNN, MSNBC, whatever you want. You watch jokers on both sides, Democrats and Republicans, all arguing over each other while the whole country, they sold the country downriver. That's why American people have had it. We've had it with these Democrats, Republicans. They're a bunch of shysters, all of them. They've lied to us.
And, I agree with you.
You can do your research, Rich, all day long. Just look at the track record of both political parties, what they've done to our country. They sold out this country.
I agree with you 100%. They argue over the menial issues, but the real issues that we face, things like welfare reform, things like making sure that people aren't living in poverty, things like making sure that our kids can go to school and not get shot, things like making sure that people don't feel like outcasts in society. They're not focusing on those issues. Instead, they want to talk about things like gun rights.
The quality of life for the middle class has gone down the drain. It's going down the drain very quickly. Now, just in our state, right? I call Bacon Hill, up in Boston. They voted for pay raises twice. We haven't seen the working folks' wages go up since the late 90s. It's been stagnant. People are they're struggling day to day to raise their families. Youngsters they're overwhelmed with college debt. The whole country's just gone down the handbasket. And we're supposed to trust these Democrats and Republicans to look out for us.
And it's funny.
One of the things, Rich, let me say this: one of someone called on Facebook to do your research. I've done my research. They sold us out time and time again with a smile and a handshake. And it's hoodwinked. and we've been deceived.
And it's funny that you say that, because you can always tell it's an election cycle in a state because you see all this information come out that supports elder populations from people who are worried about being voted out. So we actually have one coming out, and I'm actually going to be talking about that tomorrow, some of the crazy legislation that's being proposed all around the country by state legislators. And I'll give you a heads up. Somebody in Rhode Island is talking about doing a $20 fee on anybody who wants to access internet pornography per quarter. Somebody else is talking about filing legislation to stop elder bullying, and not bullying as a whole, elder bullying.
I want to make one more point, Rick, very quickly, so somebody else can chime in.
You got it.
And that is, both parties can't even protect our border. Our border's wide open. They can't even come to agreement on that.
So
all
actually,
they're talking about continuously is gun control. They can't even. The immigration law is there on the books. They don't enforce our immigration laws. All of them. They're both Democrats and Republicans. They're not doing people's business. That's why people have said, you know what? I'm fed up. I'm not going to vote anymore. My vote don't count. Why? Big multinational corporations. They run this country.
And when it comes to
and
actually when it comes to open borders and stuff like that, there actually has been some work at the Senate where there's a Democrat and Republican sponsored bill at the Senate level, and unfortunately the people on the extremes don't want to hear it, and it's being talked about very little. Your boy John McCain is part of that, and John McCain is working in the middle to try to come up with some real reform when it comes to immigration. And unfortunately, it's a compromise. Fortunately, it's a compromise between Democrats and Republicans. But the extreme Democrats and the extreme Republicans don't even want to hear it. It's absurd.
Big multinational corporations, they love cheap labor. Where you get cheap labor, you get all these illegals to work for you. Nancy Pelosi, she's probably got illegals working in her hotels.
Thank you so much for your call.
She talks about how she's for the poor. She's loaded with money. I'm sick and tired of these fake Democrats and these Republicans. It's about time we get some new parties in here. Let's turn this country around. Do your research. Vote them all out of office. They're a bunch of bums.
Thank you so much for your call. I really appreciate it, and we're going to go to the next person on the line. You're live on legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Oh, good morning.
How you doing today?
I'm doing good. I think that some people actually do represent the constituents. I don't believe that anybody in, say, Louis Gohmert's district is really all that upset with him and the stuff that he advocates for. You know, and you could say that about a couple of senators too. Rand Paul will be one, and Mike Lee would be another, and Ted Cruz. So not everybody is bad. I disagree with the public financing of campaigns, and I'll tell you why. Because that's my money. Right? And you're going to give some of my money to somebody who I oppose. I'm not for that.
Now, here's a question about the public financing. What if somebody who you're supporting is being dwarfed by, say for instance, it sounds like you're a Republican. Say, for instance, you're in a Democratic state, and the amount of money that's going towards these Democratic candidates is 5 times, 10 times more than any Republican who wants to run for that office.
Incidentally, I am in a Democratic state, and that does happen.
All right, so do you think that would level the playing field for somebody like that?
No. What would level the playing field, honestly, would be to take away the ability of people who talk about corporate financing and all that. Well, take away the ability of the corporations to contribute to campaigns.
I agree with that.
And individuals only, and anybody who works in that corporation can contribute to whatever candidate they please.
And there are states that already do that, and Massachusetts being one of them. There are states that already say that corporations can't contribute, but PACs can. So I'm of the opinion that one of the reasons why people are saying that it should be federally funded or state funded for campaign dollars and money being dispersed is to prevent corporations from having their play, even by potentially giving somebody more money to invest in a political candidate, because that's something that happens. That's something that you see countless articles on people who gave their employees money so they could invest into certain candidates who are going to do what the corporation wanted them to do.
Well,
and one of those was where the owners of
action committees, right? You mentioned PAC.
Yeah, and one of those was the Easy Disposal Corporation, who shortly afterwards got a deal in the city of Fall River.
Like I said, don't know anything about that, but and I'm not sure how you go around it, but you say political action committees. Well, there is laws that limit the contact between the candidates and the political action committees. Right? They can't directly communicate. I mean, we had just on a national level, something that actually came to light was you have these groups that were working for the Clinton campaign that were paying certain people to do certain various things, like go and start trouble at a Trump rally. And these videos are out there. The people are connected to the Clintons, and that an area of investigation has been done.
The same thing happens on both sides.
For that too, but
the same thing happens on both sides, and it's usually more brutal in local elections.
No, well, like I said, I wouldn't know too much about that. See, the people that I've supported in the local elections don't usually get elected because they talk about things like honest assessments and telling people the truth, fiscal responsibility, things like that.
No idea what you're talking about.
Usually, mostly it's on like the city council level, but that's the type of person that I support, though. I like fiscal responsibility. I like honest assessments of government and the situations that are going on in the city. That's why I don't really care for how the school funding thing has been talked about. Because it hasn't been honest.
Because we have to, we are going into a commercial break, and I appreciate your call, but we do have to get to a break. We're already a few minutes behind. Thank you so much for your call.
Yeah, have a good day.
Have a great day. And we're talking about voting today, and we're talking about why only 55% of the population voted in the 2016 election when it came for president. And is 55% a lot? Is it not enough? And somebody proposed maybe we should do a national day. But it seems like more and more the ability for people's vote to matter keeps on being diminished over and over and over again. And you see this with the national committees, whether it be the Republican National Committee or the Democratic National Committee. You see this when it comes to things like Citizens United, which is making sure that your dollars don't actually make a major impact on people who are at the federal level. Because they can contribute, they can get millions or billions of dollars from organizations who make sure that that politician is pushing their agenda. And who are they really representing? Is it representing you, or is it representing the corporations? Now, here's the interesting part about all this. You have the opportunity to be able to ask them to do their job. You know why? Because you pay them. You pay your politicians to do their job with your tax dollars. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is they take their tax dollars, they assume that it's already entitled to them, and they expect the money above and beyond to actually convince them to do one thing or another through lobbying, through things like campaign donations, and it's crazy when you really think about it. So really, if they think that they're entitled to that money, as somebody previously stated on Facebook Live, maybe we should just stop giving them that money. Because if our taxes aren't going towards representation of us, then why are we paying taxes? Somebody on Facebook Live, actually it's the famous Jim DuPont, who has a show here on 1480 WSAR at 3 o'clock. He says, if you want to be effective in politics, you need to get organized. And that involves working with people you might not always agree with. Something not everyone is interested or willing to do. And that's a very fair point. There are people who call into the show who I disagree with every single time they call in. There are people who I disagree with sometimes. But we should be having the conversations, and we should be talking about these issues, keeping them on the surface, because they're issues that really matter. And I get it. Sometimes people don't necessarily agree with my opinion in its entirety, but that's your purpose to call in and state your opinion. That's, in politics, you're going to vote for somebody who you don't agree with 100% of the time. But you shouldn't agree with anybody 100% on everything that they agree with. You should look at all of the issues and say, hey, who most likely represents me? And who is more like me and benefits my values than anybody else? And it's very difficult to do that today in politics, because the people who are getting elected to office all come from middle class or higher. And when you look at the fact that 51% of kids who are in school today are living in poverty, majority of this nation is growing up in poverty, so how does a politician actually represent those kids? So maybe that's why 55% of the people who vote are 55% of the people who are voting who are of adult age, because they grew up in poverty and they feel that politicians don't represent them. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Good morning, Rich. How you doing?
I'm doing great today. How are you doing?
Good. Taxes. The pet peeve of everybody. And one of my pet peeve is that excise tax.
Okay.
Don't we love it when that bill comes in every year?
Well, here's what I say. If you can actually measure how those tax dollars are benefiting you and how they're making the future of where you live and your country and your state better, then that's fine. It's when you pay these taxes on things that are really just going towards things like pay raises and stuff like that is just absurd. When you look at the pay raises that happened in various states, and like Massachusetts, where people were getting ridiculous pay raises because they argued that people wouldn't run for the office unless they got paid more, it's absurd. That doesn't represent the average person.
I want to tell you about excise tax, and this is something that was originated, because I want to tell you, I want to put a little light to this. I was talking to my daughter. My youngest daughter lives on the other side of the state. She's working a job now. She has a job in.
And which state is that?
She's in Chicopee, Springfield area, right?
All right, so she's in Massachusetts.
She's in Massachusetts.
Okay.
And she pays excise tax. They all pay excise tax on that side of the state too. But guess what? Says a 2014 Honda. It's a little older than my car. I have a newer car. Now, and she's younger. She's in her 20s. She's in her mid-20s. She's only paying like $40-some a year for her excise tax. I'm paying $3 and change for my excise tax, and here I am, an older man. I'm paying a ton of money more. Now, I understand. I guess there's a rating here where you live and what the situation is as far as accidents, I guess, or what the cause is. I don't know what the whole calculation means, but I don't get it. Okay, I'm paying more than she is, and she's younger than I am. And why? And so, what's wrong with this picture? Why am I paying a ton of money on an excise tax while she's paying, not even a quarter of what I'm paying?
And where is that money actually going? So when you look at things in Massachusetts like the gas tax.
It's supposed to be roads and highways, correct? Your local roads are supposed to be being fixed for the excise
But
tax.
here's the way it works. And there's a lot of states out there who use the lottery as a means to pay their general fund. And what they say is something along the lines of, hey, you know what? These lottery dollars are actually paying for education. But what it really does is it provides a subsidy for the general fund where they don't submit 100% of the dollars that they would have to education, and instead they're using those dollars towards something else. So they just reallocate the funds. So hold on. Let me finish.
Where she lives, right? Let me
finish. The reason why I'm saying that, and it relates directly towards roads and highways, and the reason why that is because they say that this is going specifically to that. But all they do is they pull their general fund dollars away from that and put it towards something else, usually their own pockets.
Okay, but you didn't. But what needs to be addressed is, I understand the general fund thing, but what needs to be addressed? Why is it where she lives in her area of? Listen, I have another call, so I got to go.
You know what? I have other callers too, and I'm sitting here having a conversation with you. So I appreciate your call. Have a great day. And I think you bring up a fair point. Why are people in some portions of the state paying more than others, especially in places that aren't as advanced economically as some other places? And that is a very fair question. And I'd say to you, that'd be a great question for your state representative if they actually represented you. But a lot of times, the state representative won't even have a conversation with you unless you bump into them somewhere or you're contributing to their campaign. And if you do have a conversation with them, they're going to tell you what you want to hear and not do it anyway. So that happens all over this country. That's something that politicians do. The famous Jim DuPont says, we've been voting on Saturdays for a couple hundred years in Raynham, which is Raynham, Massachusetts, where he lives. And the last several town elections had less than a 10% turnout. So voting on weekends, I don't think works. What I do think is a national holiday where you can only vote once a year would make an impact. If you had the day off and you celebrated our freedom on that day, we had parades on that day, and we do something along the lines of saying, hey, when everybody goes out and votes, we all get together. We make it a custom where everybody goes out and has a drink together, has a bite together if you don't drink, but goes and sits and relaxes and celebrates their freedom. How about we do it on 4th of July? How about we set it up every single 4th of July to celebrate our freedom? We also vote on whatever the issues are for local, state, and federal government. You know why that doesn't happen? Because ultimately, politicians don't want to work with timelines. They want to operate around whatever time they want to operate around. And unfortunately, holding people's feet to the fire is something that politicians don't like. So if we could only resist to doing it once a year, all special elections, everything would have to be controlled on that one time a year. How different would the process be at that point in time? Would more people go out and vote if they knew every single July 4th, not only was it the 4th of July, but they had to go to the ballot box and actually have a vote? How different would the process be at that point in time? About, does your vote really matter? Are your politicians representing you? And what incentive do they have to continue to represent you if they are representing you? Somebody on Facebook Live says, stop all special elections unless it's to fill a seat due to someone passing away or stepping down. And you know, I think that that is a good point. I'd like to add to that a little bit that I think that they shouldn't even have a special election if somebody passes away or steps down. We should have an interim until the next election. And because that does things like help people with voter burnout, that helps things with voter apathy, and they know every single time, every single year on the same exact day that that is the day to vote. No question, no votes on July 4th or whatever that day happens to be. That is the day that everybody goes out to vote. So check it out. If you like us on the J&J Jewelers Facebook Live cam, share it with your friends so that way they can join in on the conversation. If you enjoy this show, Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres, and you want to see previous episodes with us, you can go to youtube.com, type in Brain Drain with Rich Cabaceres or Brain Drain with Rich, and it will pop up. Like the page, and you can see every previous episode that we've recorded without the commercials, live. Well, not live, because I guess it was recorded live, but you can see it without the commercials, and you can see every single topic that we've ever talked about. So, you know, this is a good opportunity for you to be able to kind of keep up with the show, get informed, and sponsor a great show like a great company like J&J Jewelers, because this whole thing is brought to you by J&J Diamond Jewelers on 167 Borden Street in Fall River, Massachusetts. J&J Jewelers is not only coming to you live in their store, and I know I'm saying that as if it's a radio show, and I'm doing that on purpose, but they're live to you on the internet as well, jjjewelry.com. You can browse everything that they have in their store. Literally everything. jjjewelry.com. You can browse everything that they have in their store. And if there's something that you want and it's not on their website, it's not in their store, you can talk to Danielle. You can talk to Sharon. And guess what? They'll help you find it. They'll help you build it because they have a direct relationship with these jewelers, because they've been in this business for 2 decades and they make their living on making sure that you get the quality that you deserve. It's not like going into one of these big box stores and you go into the store and it's somebody who's making minimum wage just trying to get you out the door as fast as possible so they can go back to texting their boyfriend or girlfriend. This is somebody who, and these are people who have been in this business and they want to make sure that you continue to come back because you have that quality experience at J&J Diamond Jewelers. So go visit them, 167 Borden Street in Fall River, Massachusetts, and also you can go to jjjewelry.com and check them out. Somebody on Facebook Live says, how about the development of a phone app that allows people to vote, but at the same time it ensures the security and integrity of the voting process, making voting easier for people? That makes a lot of sense. Maybe we need to reach people in ways that we haven't before, and that would be representative of them. But I think ultimately there has to be something done to increase voter turnout instead of just blaming the people who are not coming out to vote. You're live on the legendary 1480 WSAR. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. This is in response to the gentleman who called up about the vehicle excise tax.
Sure.
I just wanted to clarify something. I tuned in kind of in the middle of his conversation, but I assumed he was talking about Massachusetts, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The excise tax in Massachusetts is $25 per thousand, and it's the same statewide. Doesn't matter where you live.
It's the additional input on top of it from the actual municipalities.
Well, no, it goes by the year of your vehicle. So in other words, they do it by percentage-wise. You get whacked the first couple of years if you have a brand new vehicle. If it's the year of manufacturer, they base the vehicle value on 90% of the manufacturer's list price for that year. So if you bought a 2018 vehicle right now and it's 2018, you would pay an excise tax based on 90% of that manufacturer's list price for this first year.
You know what? You're 100% correct. I was wrong on stating that previously. You are correct, and I remember reading that.
Right, and the second year, just for completeness here, second year it drops down to 60% of the vehicle value. Third year, 40%, fourth year, 25%, and the fifth year and onwards, you only pay 10% of the manufacturer's list price on that vehicle. So this is the same excise tax no matter where you live in Massachusetts. It's $25 per thousand. The rate is the same, and they base the amount of the tax based on the year of your vehicle. So, that's how it's calculated. So it doesn't matter if you're in Fall River or Somerset or Swansea or whatever. It's a statewide formula. So I just figured I'd clarify that because it seemed to be misleading that different municipalities were charging different rates.
Sure thing. So do you think that is actually going towards what it should be going towards, which is roads and streets and highways?
Well, it's like anything else. They want to have a tax, and they say it's going to be used for this or that, and then it gets into the general fund coffers, and some pet projects get funded, et cetera. I mean, they can try to, to get things passed. They can tell you where the money's supposed to go, but then after the fact, you find out that this money was siphoned off by some other department or whatever. So there's no guarantee, even if they tell you right to your face that this is where this money is going. There's no guarantee it's going to go where they say it's supposed to go.
And it's funny that you say that, because usually what happens is 100% of those proceeds will go towards that thing. But the thing that they don't tell you is the funds that they had there previously end up going towards something else.
Right, yeah. So anyway, I just figured I'd clarify that. So it doesn't matter where you live. If that gentleman's paying significantly more for his excise tax compared to someone else, it's probably because he has a newer vehicle and he's either in that 90, 60, or 40% of the vehicle value, as opposed to if the other person's got a vehicle 5 years old or older, they're only paying on the value of 10% of that vehicle.
Thanks for looking out. I appreciate it. Have a great day. Good morning. You're live on 1480 WSAR.
Good morning.
How you doing today?
Hanging in there. You were discussing about why people don't vote or they don't care for voting anymore.
That's right.
The American people are outnumbered in Washington about 100 to 1 with lobbyists. I mean, it's like killer bees. All of these representatives or senators are being swarmed constantly by foreign interests and different corporations, multinational corporations. And it's the American people are really being put on the backbone, and you can see it over the years by policy that's being passed on Capitol Hill.
I agree with you 100%. I think lobbying dollars is part of the problem, and things like Citizens United is not actually helping people, and why they use Citizens United as the term for it is ridiculous, because it's the exact opposite of what's happening. It's dividing people.
And some job security for some of these politicians when they leave their political office, they go work for some of these lobbying firms.
Yep.
So there's a lot going on, and the American people are very astute to what's going on. There's a lot of corporate money, and the Supreme Court says that's a form of free speech. I don't really see in the foreseen future anything being radically done to change the way things are. The American people are just set up with whether legislation that doesn't look out, whether it's the Mexican border, whether it's trade agreements, taxation, the national deficit now that Donald Trump proposes spending another $4.7 billion or maybe trillion to the debt ceiling being raised again. I mean, do the American people really believe that they're fiscally responsible?
Now, here's my question. Do you think that we can actually change it at all? Do you think it's ever possible to change the system so that way our politicians start representing us again?
Yes, and the only way you can do that is by supporting new parties, new ideas.
But how?
Grassroots efforts.
So how do you do that when the dollars and the way that the voting system actually is in the United States, a third party to come up and rise is highly unlikely. They end up getting dwarfed into the Democratic or the Republican Party. And one clear example of that, or two, are the Libertarian Party and the Tea Party. They're looked at a lot of the times as Republicans.
It's a chess game that they're playing. You have to put money behind these political leaders that you want to represent your interests.
Well, there are people there are people out there right now who are trying to change the way that people vote, so that way if you want to run as a third-party candidate or a fourth-party candidate, you have the ability to do that with the new voting system, because the first-to-poll system that we currently have is always going to lean towards two parties being stronger than every other party, even if there's 20 parties. And then they're going to just have to conform.
The other thing, too, is when there are debates between whether it's national elections or even state elections, they can't. The Democrats and the Republicans have such a stronghold. If you're an independent candidate, they basically they don't allow that candidate to debate, because if the people can hear their platform, they will vote for them. But because they don't want that, so the problem is, it's like you mentioned before, those political parties have a stronghold of the political system, and I agree it's going to be very difficult. But you have to back them. Unfortunately, they have to have enough money so that they can compete against these political parties. And unfortunately, if there's not enough money behind them, with the extraordinary amount of money that it costs to campaign, it's almost impossible.
Now, I want to thank you so much for your call, because I think you're bringing up some good points. Have a great day. And one of the things that I want to point out is, if you allowed everybody to go on who ran for a political office to actually go on the stage, especially at the gubernatorial stage or the senatorial, when it goes to the federal government or even the president of the United States, there could be some serious outtakes. It's potentially a double-edged sword, and you can go on YouTube and look up multiple cases of somebody who's running for a governor, and they're saying some whacked-out stuff, and it ends up turning into comedic relief. And maybe I'll find one of those YouTube videos when we come back from break. But a previous caller said that we should allow everybody to speak up during presidential, gubernatorial, senatorial elections, and I want to give you a fine example of where this could potentially turn bad. This is the Idaho gubernatorial debates, and they allowed everybody... I'm already laughing, that's not good. They're allowing everybody to speak, so here we go.
Walt Bays is a high school graduate, a great-grandfather, who says he has lost almost as many elections as Abraham Lincoln. He has lived in Idaho for 70 years. All right, thank you, Senator Fulcher. Mr. Brown, your remarks.
I was filling out my taxes a couple of months ago, and I thought to myself, thank God we don't get all the government that we pay for. They say that the child is the father of the man. And when I was a kid, I used to play Army all the time. Bang, I got you. No, bang, I got you. I could never once remember one incident in my childhood when I played politician.
So think about this. This guy could be running for president, and we would see that, and it would actually turn into comic relief. I think more people would tune into presidential elections, gubernatorial elections, if we knew that guys like this would be on there. Let's listen more.
For the Corps. Anyhow, I got out of the service, and several years later, I was at the low point of my life. I mean, things were bad. And I cried out to God. I said, God, how about putting me back on active duty and making me a battalion commander? Long story short, he says, no, son, I got a higher rank for you. I'm going to make you the commander-in-chief. And I stagger not at his promise.
So yes, that's an Idaho gubernatorial GOP candidate. And here we go. Here's Mr. Brown.
I stand on principles. I went to jail for homeschooling. And my kids turned out pretty good. I had 4 sons that made pro rodeo cowboys and 1 daughter. I've got 77 descendants. My wife and I had 16 kids, 8 boys and 8 girls.
All right, so we're going to kind of continue with the conversation, but that's potentially the double-edged sword of allowing anybody to just get up there and speak without kind of pre-qualification, is you can have a guy who... Or guys who really aren't qualified to serve in those positions. And granted, they may make good points, 1 or 2 good points. But unfortunately, what ends up happening is it turns into comedic relief a lot of the time. And maybe that's good. Maybe that's exactly what we need to get people to pay attention to the process more, so as to have one of these outlandish candidates who is saying nothing but stupidity. But that being said, I think that we're leaning towards the right direction when we're talking about allowing everybody to be on the stage and hearing from everybody. We saw that in the Republican National Convention and the Republican National debates, where they had two separate stages. They had one stage with all the people who looked like they were front runners, Donald Trump standing right in the middle, and then they had the second stage with all the people who may have had really good ideas and a lot of support and could have been your next president of the United States and done the job very effectively, but they weren't even listened to because they were put off on other channels and stuff like that. It was up to you to have to do the additional research to hear what those people said, and they did get some votes. But the scary part is, who knows if that would have been the best president of the United States on one of those stages? And how did they get to the front stage? Probably by working these backdoor deals, taking care of people, probably by taking certain political dollars from organizations and having people vouch for them. And it was probably based on money. So really, when you look at it, how do we make sure that more people turn out to an election? Right now, I can tell you whatever it is we're doing right now is not working, because young people are not voting. Elder people are not voting because they think that the system doesn't listen to them. They think that the system is broken, and nobody's trying to fix the system. So if you're in government and you're listening to this show right now, you're watching this show on Facebook Live, here's a suggestion. Do something different, because whatever you're doing right now is not working. And I get it. You are elected by a small population. You are elected by a minority of the people. Because if you were elected by 50% of the current population that voted in the federal election, then you were only elected by 23% of the vote. So, I get it. You were elected by a minority of the people, and you want the voter turnout to stay small. So that being said, maybe you could be the person to change the entire system. Maybe you could be the person who starts representing the people of the United States. And we're going to go to a call. You're live on legendary 1480 WSA. You've got 30 seconds. Go for it.
Well, young people came out to vote for Bernie, and he got the carpet pulled right out from underneath him, and I can see why they were disenchanted with the whole thing.
You bring up a very fair point.
I believe that if he would have got the nomination, he would be president today.
I
wouldn't have supported him, but he would be president.
I agree with you 100%. Thank you so much for your call. Have a great day.
Yep.
And again, there's another example of people who were not represented because the system didn't allow them to be represented. The carpet got pulled out right from underneath Bernie Sanders and the young people, as that caller just stated. So I want to thank you all for another great show. I want you to continue talking about this as the day goes on, what we can do to make sure that our voice is heard again. And if you're in politics, what you can do to change the process to make sure everybody is represented.